I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The KrisAnne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come on!
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the KrisAnne Hall Show. KrisAnne Hall here. KrisAnnehall.com. Liberty over security, principle over party, truth over your favorite personality. And aren't those personalities imploding? Oh my goodness. What a colossal waste of time and money our Congress has become, so blatantly, so obviously so. I don't even know why we have them come back from recess. What exactly is the point of Congress today? It is not the people. The House of Representatives has forgotten that they represent the people. The Senate has forgotten that they represent the states. The federal government, through the executive branch, is completely out of control. And we have a judicial branch that thinks that they are the rulers of the universe. What exactly is the point of Congress if it's not to keep these things in check and to follow the Constitution? I mean, let's just be clear here. We have a federal government that is completely and totally out of control, and they make absolutely no excuse for it anymore. They're so blatantly, so disgustingly beyond limitations. They don't make excuses anymore. Oh, okay, we're just going to go on recess. It's time. Oh, look at that. It's 5 o'clock. Time to clock out. What? You know what? This is how they operate because they realize they're going to go on recess. And then something crazy is going to happen. Some crisis is going to come up. And then you'll have forgotten about Planned Parenthood. We're going to go on vacation while this Planned Parenthood thing just completely explodes. So by the time we come back, there'll be some new crisis and you'll have forgotten, and we won't have to defund the baby chop shops. Yeah, baby chop shops. That's what I'm going to call them now, the baby chop shops. So what do? I mean, that's how they work. I'll remind you that President Obama, 2 years ago, was it 2 years now, created replacements in his cabinet during the Christmas break, infamously termed the Christmas appointments. And while our senators were on Christmas vacation, they were outraged at what the president was doing. He is not allowed to make appointments without our approval. Well, but Obama said it was an emergency. It was when the senators were in recess. They were recess appointments. The only problem was they weren't at recess. But then they went on recess. And the senator said, no, we can't have this. We're not at recess. And then they said, we'll take care of it when we get back. And they let it sit. And then when they came back, their outrage was gone. They'd been fattened on their turkey and potatoes and white Zinfandel. And the next thing you know, there's a new crisis, and nobody cares about the Christmas appointments. Nobody cares that the very first president of the United States, President Andrew Johnson, was impeached for the very thing that Obama did. And yet our Senate was outraged, absolutely furious, and then they weren't. So what does that tell us? Alexander Hamilton said experience is the oracle of truth, and where its responses are unequivocal, they ought to be held to be sacred and conclusive. When the same thing happens over and over again, you can be sure it will happen again the same way in the future. Patrick Henry said, I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that's the lamp of experience. I know no way to judge the future but by the past. They're simply saying what Einstein said in the contrary, that if you do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, then that's insanity. And here we are expecting different results from the same people who do the same things over and over again. Christmas recess. We're going to go on a Christmas recess so that we don't have to actually do anything, and the people will forget that there's a problem. Wow. Amazing, huh? What would be their precedent for understanding that's how the American public works? I'm absolutely disgusted. Can I just simply say, I am disgusted with Congress, and I'm disappointed in the shortest attention spans of the American people. I wonder, can we keep a mental thought on something very, very important through the House recess? Do you remember we talked about the other day, Representative Mark Meadows pushed forward a resolution to remove Boehner as Speaker of the House? Well, guess what? Boehner refused to do anything with his resolution because, oh, and I love this. This is what Breitbart says. That Boehner was discouraged from doing anything with this resolution because his supporters believed that he would be embarrassed. He would be embarrassed by the opportunity of the House to vote on who their House leader would be. So Boehner, refusing the voice of a representative of a people, Boehner refusing the voice of the people, the voice of many people, obviously, so that he won't be embarrassed. Representative Walter Jones of North Carolina says that Boehner is not a good leader. Although he has nothing personally against him, he thinks he's a good man. Seriously? You don't know much about John Boehner, Mr. Jones. John Boehner, the man who says that he personally passed out bribes on the House floor and that he knew that it was wrong, but he did it anyway, and that he promised he would never do it again. Yeah, that's John Boehner, the good man. And now, the good man, who is not a good leader, who is not a good man, refuses to let the people be heard because he doesn't want to be embarrassed. Just one more reason why Boehner needs to go. And one more reason why the people need to bombard their representatives while they're on recess and make sure they don't forget. Hey, your House rep is on recess. Don't let him forget. In every town hall meeting, in everything that he does while he is at home, you had better be up in his face about getting rid of Boehner, because the House has gone on recess without any votes about the baby chop shops. Without any votes at all. Even the Senate, who has no power to defund anything, according to Article 1, Section 7, says we'll have a vote. And the House leaves for summer recess until September 8th without voting on anything Oh, no. We're not going to remove federal funding of the baby chop shops until we can have our vacation. Because our vacation is more important than shutting down baby chop shops. Are you kidding me? How does that even... How do you even comprehend such a thing? Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And our house is acting on the baby shops. Don't make no mistake. They are speaking loud and clear. We are hoping that you will forget. We are hoping that you will have a new crisis that comes up before September 8th. We're pretty sure we can orchestrate one because we have no intentions of shutting down the baby chop shops. Because guess what? If we shut down the baby chop shops, it won't be politically advantageous for us, for our president in this election term. We can't end Planned Parenthood funding because, then we'll have all the liberals hating us because we'll have defunded their birth control and defunded whatever. Federal government has tried to sort of sequester their funding. No federal funding used for abortion, but we know how that works. You can't partition off funding. That's ridiculous. You say, okay, you can only use this money for non-abortion issues. So they keep collecting money, and the money that they would have used for those non-abortion issues is now funneled to abortion. Baby chop shops. This is disgusting, people. And we as a moral society ought to be outraged by something like this. We ought to be completely and totally vomiting in the streets until Congress... there should have been no question. The minute these videos came out, there should have been a motion on the House floor right then and there, at least to temporarily defund until a hearing could be convened. That's what should have happened. You want to do an investigation? Fine. We're going to temporarily defund you until you do an investigation and find out what's going on. That's what they do in every other sector of the federal government. Why not baby chop shops?
KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Is the term baby chop shops, is that offensive? Good, I hope it is, because you're supposed to be offended by something like this. If you found out the VA was using veterans' organs and doing surgeries without people needing them so that they could sell organs of adults, wouldn't we be outraged? Why is it? Because government has defined life that this doesn't apply? So it's just more of this running to the court system to define things, idiocy that has brought us to this point. We run to the court to define things it has no business defining. We run to the court to decide things that they have no business, no power to decide. We fail to read the Constitution and understand what is really under the court's jurisdiction and what is not. I mean, it's just simple reading skills. We know the progressives don't have those, and we know those who expand federal power don't want them. But Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 makes the power of the court so very, very clear. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity. And that's where the progressives want to stop. That's where the federal supremacists want to stop. But they can't stop there. There's absolutely no real grammatical reason to stop there. It says the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. You see those two qualifiers there. Under this Constitution, under their authority. The Constitution delegates limited authority to the federal government, and it didn't expand that authority for the courts. The courts operate under the limit of the Constitution. The Constitution has delegated certain powers to the federal government, and even the courts cannot circumvent that and expand that. And guess what? The states are to be the rulers over that. Because the states are the creators of the central government. You can't create something greater than yourself. The people, through the Lee Resolution, published and declared in the Declaration of Independence, created the states, which means through natural order and natural law, the people are superior to the states. The states, through ratification of 3/4 of the states, created the Constitution, which created the central government. The natural law and the natural order of things says that the states are then creators of the Constitution and the federal government, and then the states are superior to their creation, the federal government. James Madison tells us so very clearly this principle. Madison writes in the Virginia Assembly Report of 1800, if the decisions of the judiciary be raised above the authority of the states, dangerous powers not delegated may not only be usurped and executed by other departments, but that the judicial department also may exercise or sanction dangerous powers beyond the grant of the Constitution. Why? Because the judicial department is part of the federal government, and we have delegated few and defined powers to the federal government. Madison says, consequently, the ultimate right of the states to judge whether the Constitution has been dangerously violated must extend to violations by one delegated authority as well as by another, by the judiciary as well as by the executive or the legislative. And yet we have people in states running to the Supreme Court to do things they've never been delegated to do, when it's the power and the authority and the obligation of the states to even rein in the judicial branch. You don't like their decision on life? Well, good, because they don't have the authority to decide life through the Constitution under their authority. So guess what? Don't follow it. The states should be simply saying, hey, you are just 1/3 of the federal government, the least powerful of the 1/3, and we don't have to submit to your opinions when you are outside your authority. Life is outside your authority. Marriage is outside your authority. Housing is outside your authority. Environment is outside your authority. So guess what, federal government, through the Supreme Court of the United States? We don't recognize your authority over these stolen matters, and we will not honor your stolen authority, and we will operate our business as states should, independent and sovereign, and we will not comply with your tyranny. Period.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. That is a reference to the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause says the Constitution and the laws of the United States and the treaties which shall be made in compliance to the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. In pursuance thereof, the Supremacy Clause says, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land without any qualifier. And the only way laws of the United States and treaties have supremacy is if they are made in pursuance to the Constitution. Which means that if they are outside the delegated authorities, then they are not the supreme law of the land, which means they are no law at all. As a matter of fact, the big government guy, Hamilton, said in Federalist 78, he said, no law contrary to the Constitution can be valid. No law contrary to the Constitution can be valid. You can't get any simpler than that. And then he warns us, if you allow laws contrary to the Constitution to be valid, he said, the deputy will be greater than the principal, the servant above the master. You see that relationship there? He's talking about the relationship between the states and the federal government. The federal government is supposed to be the deputy to the principal states. The federal government is supposed to be the servant to the state master. And he said, if you keep going long enough, allowing federal laws to be valid, even though they are contrary or not in compliance with the Constitution, he said, you'll find yourselves in a situation where the representatives of the people will find themselves superior to the people themselves. We wouldn't know anything about that. We wouldn't know anything about the House of Representatives refusing to take up issues that outrage the people. Immediate protests in the streets over the baby chop shops, and they have to go on vacation first. John Boehner refuses to hear the people through their representatives that they don't want him to be the leader of the House. And yet, we have to go on vacation because we don't want John Boehner to be embarrassed. John Boehner needs to be embarrassed, ought to be embarrassed. And you know what is the real tragedy here? The real tragedy is that he is not embarrassed on his own. Do you see? All of his behavior does not embarrass him because I believe he is seared conscience and a psychopath. He has absolutely no concern about anything but himself, his political power, and his personal gain. He is a coward of the highest degree, pusillanimous to every point of personality. He is not in love with Barack Obama. He is in love with approval. He is in love with power. He is in love with his own gain. And he would suck up to Mao Zedong and to Hitler if he had the opportunity, because that's the kind of man John Boehner is. He is not a good man. He is a despicable, disgraceful man, and he ought to be embarrassed by his behavior. Period. He ought to be embarrassed by the fact that he continues to thwart the people's efforts to defund this executive agency who is completely and totally out of control. Remember, Article 1, Section 7 says, the simple majority in the House can fund and defund everything and anything. And yet Boehner gives lip service. Why? Because silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act. And Bonhoeffer is reminding us that John Boehner is evil himself. And we have a moral obligation to remove evil when it's so blatantly in front of our faces. Well, this is great because now we are in this habit of running to the courts. Now remember, experience is the oracle of truth, and where its responses are unequivocal, they ought to be held to be sacred and conclusive. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that's the lamp of experience. I know no way to judge the future but by the past. And what in the past gives us any indication that the courts will ever rule according to the Constitution? Yes, I called it a ruling because that's what we call it, right? The courts issue rulings. That's what we believe. We've forgotten and we refuse to believe that only kings issue rulings. Courts issue rulings which make courts our kings. We've assumed their opinions to have legal authority over us when they are the least capable of branch. Do you know when we give court rulings the elevation of see there, I did it again, huh? Are you paying attention? We give court opinions the elevation of rulings so that they can, through their opinions, make law. Do you understand how that violates separation of powers? The only branch of government with the authority to make law constitutionally is Congress. But we're so far away from that, we think that the Supreme Court can make law too. I mean, after all, the executive branch makes law all the time, through their regulatory agencies, through the permission of Congress. We talked about the Safe Food Act. The opponents call it the Dark Act. I like that. That's pretty awesome. The Safe Food Act, which says we're going to keep you safe by labeling, and then hands all the authority over to the FDA and the Department of Ag to write all the laws about the rulings. We're going to let the Department of Ag, and we're going to let the Secretary of the FDA, we're going to let them write the laws that govern the states on labeling, and that's okay with Congress. We can do that. We can relinquish our reserved power to create law by simply calling it a regulation. What exactly is the difference between a regulation and a law? There is no difference. And the problem is, the Supreme Court upholds these regulations as laws. And even worse than that, has blatantly, publicly deferred to the agencies to create that law. That's the normal practice of the Supreme Court now. We defer to the agencies in their writings of regulations by the authority given to them by Congress. Congress doesn't have any authority to delegate power to the executive branch. That's not something that we delegated to them. But we have a legislative branch that has gone beyond the Constitution. And so not only are they superior to the people themselves, they are superior to the very document that created them, which means they have no limit at all. And yet now the people, in the heat of all of this, baby chop shops and such, are running to the courts, the federal courts again, to redefine life. We are asking the courts again to bring up the issue of life. The interesting thing is that the Roe v. Wade case left off with the language, if you can prove that viability exists at an earlier stage, then we will have to have a different opinion. Okay? So you show us that viability exists prior to this point that we determined viability exists, then we will change our opinion. The problem is that viability is subjective, but life is not. It wasn't science that made Roe v. Wade. It was judicial activism that made Roe v. Wade. And life is not something that should be legislated away. Life is an inalienable right. Government doesn't give you life, so they should not be able to legislate it away. This is a right to life that begins at conception, and that is a biological fact. This fact was not overturned by science in Roe v. Wade, but manipulations of facts through law and judicial activism. You see, if real science had been used and not legal manipulation, denying life in the womb at conception would have failed. The argument of viability is based upon the argument that if you remove the fetus from the womb at a certain point, that fetus, or if you prefer, those cells, would die, and therefore was not alive and not a person. Logically speaking, by admitting that this life will die implies that it was alive at some point. But using the same logic to determine that life never existed does not uphold in science either. There are many single-celled organisms that will only survive on a particular growth medium, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a microbiologist tell you that these organisms were not alive because they failed to live outside their nutrient-rich medium. Additionally, by the very definition of abortion, you must admit life existed at the time of abortion. You cannot abort an action that has never begun. If I have a goldfish in a bowl, and I take that goldfish out of his bowl of water and throw him on the pavement, he will die. Does that mean he was not alive in the goldfish bowl? Of course it doesn't. If I take you and eject you out into space, remove you from your nutrient-rich environment called Earth, and you die in space, does that mean you were not alive on Earth because you cannot survive in an environment not suited for your conditions of life? Of course not. But that's the logic that they used. And now we're going to run to the courts again and ask them to define life for us. How do you think that's going to work out for us? Again.
My right to tote the weapon of my choice. Don't censor my voice. Hate me if you won't, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crack it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none. Except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
And so now, we understand we have a limited defined federal government with certain powers delegated, others reserved to the states, remember? We talk about this all the time on this show. Federalist 45, the powers delegated to the federal government are for external objects, war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. The powers that are reserved to the states are everything, the lives, the liberties, the properties, the security, the prosperity of the state are reserved to the states. And now we have representatives from their states, attorney generals of states, asking by letter the federal government to not do things they're not empowered to do. North Dakota Attorney General Wayne Steinehem joined counterparts and other officials in 30 other states asking the Environmental Protection Agency to delay the implementation of a new federal water rule. Facepalm, head hits desk, completely amazed, going unconscious, head exploding. Are you stinking kidding me? The states are asking the federal government to not implement a rule they don't have the power to issue in the first place? A power that has been reserved to the states? Hey, North Dakota Attorney General, give me a call, man. I'll help you out. You don't have to write letters to the EPA. You don't have to write letters to the federal government. You do what Kansas did, and you simply stand up and say, hey, your water rule has no application in our state because you've never been delegated the power over water. I can't understand that. I don't understand how we have so lost our way. Hey, watch out. Water, attorney generals, is just the beginning. And now, because the Supreme Court And the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs versus Inclusive Communities Project, Inc., has determined that you can prove discrimination in housing by an entire neighborhood's constituency and not by a single person's actions. You need no proof at all that a single person intended to discriminate in their housing choices. You just need somebody to say, oh, this neighborhood looks too white, therefore you are discriminating in your practices. Yeah, that's what the Supreme Court opinion says. So, AG of North Dakota, you think water's bad? Wait till the federal government starts coming in and ruling their affirmative, further fair housing rule. 'Cause this is only the beginning, and our states had better step up. Our states had better start realizing that they are not colonies subject to the federal government, and they do not have to comply with things that are outside the Constitution, that the Supreme Court does not make rulings, it makes opinions, and we are no more bound by the Supreme Court's opinions than by our next-door neighbor's opinions when the Supreme Court is acting outside the authority of the Constitution. Oh, fine, that's a really nice opinion on discrimination housing, Supreme Court. We appreciate your opinion. But guess what? We don't agree. And so we will not comply, because you can't make law and you can't enforce law, and the federal government can't do things outside the Constitution. Hey, states, it's time to wake up. Hey, somebody tell me how I get a personal mail to Attorney General Wayne Steinehem in North Dakota. I want to send him a signed copy of my book, Sovereign Duty. As a matter of fact, we ought to flood his office with copies of Sovereign Duty, along with these other 27 states who simply do not understand that they're not colonies subject to the federal government. They need some remedial education, people, and it can only come from us. It's time for us to wake up. We are the light of liberty. God bless. See you tomorrow.
Something down if you get it our way.